Is there anyone out there who doesn't absolutely love bubbles? They're not only fun, they're also fascinating. And when you learn how they work, they become even cooler. We talked about this in our giant bubbles experiment. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you watch it. Or if this doesn't make sense to you, make sure you watch it. As we learned, bubbles have 3 layers within its walls. And the inner layer is water. That is the only layer that is likely to freeze here, because the outer soap layers probably won't freeze before it bursts. Yes, unfortunately, the bubble will burst. Because once the ice crystals start to form in some places, this 3-layer bubble wall is just not strong enough, so some cracks will start to form around other places. And all that air that was inside that bubble that was holding the walls in place, well, now it can escape, and then the bubble will start to crumble. But hopefully this happens after we get to see some of the ice crystals starting to form. Now, this will take lower temperatures in order for this bubble to freeze. Remember from our pretty salty experiment? When salt, or pretty much anything, is added to water, it will lower its water's freezing temperature. Now, pure water freezes rather easily around 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. But when you add something into the water, that freezing temperature is lower, meaning the temperature has to be that low in order for it to freeze. All the temperatures above is just water solution, and any temperature below is going to be frozen. Now, salt water, depending on the type of salt, remember, it needs temperatures as low as negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 32 degrees Celsius. That's really cold. But soap water shouldn't need the temperature that much lower than pure water. It's not like salt. So anything under freezing temperature, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, anything below that should be fine, but the colder the better. And you can even make your bubble solution colder by putting it in the fridge for a little while or in the freezer for a few minutes. This will help it to get to that temperature a little bit quicker. You need really cold temperatures, but you want to make sure that you are bundled up really tight, because this is going to take a little time. It will take some patience, but I promise it'll be so worth it. You have to see this in person, kind of like the total solar eclipse. Now, are you ready to blow some bubbles and watch them freeze? That sounded cruel. Well, luckily they don't feel it, I don't think. Okay, those looked pretty cool. Now, it was even cooler in person. Now, I don't have a great camera, so you weren't able to see it as clearly as I could. So again, doing it in person is going to be way cooler for you. But also, this guy does have a really awesome camera, and it was able to film this, a bubble freezing. So in just a moment, you can switch over to that video to watch it, because it is so beautiful and amazing and super, super cool. No pun intended. Or maybe that pun was intended. But before we switch over to that guy's awesome video of a frozen bubble, let's talk a little bit about inspiration and how being good can make you feel good. So let's talk more about thresholds. What is a threshold? So a threshold is a point on the scale that must be reached in order for a certain reaction to happen. Yeah, let's break this down a little more. In this case, it's the specific extremely cold temperatures that need to be reached in order for our water to freeze, whether it's water, salt water, or soap water. Our freezing temperature is our threshold, so anything above that temperature, the water won't freeze, and anything below that temperature, the water will freeze. So this is our threshold. Now, as humans, we also have our own thresholds. We have a certain amount of stress that we can handle before we become overwhelmed. We have a certain amount of depression or sadness that we can handle before we become overwhelmed. And we have a certain amount of hunger that we can handle before we become very irritable. This is known as hangry. Now, once these thresholds are met, we react to these feelings. just like the water. Once the temperature is met, it reacts and turns solid. It freezes. Now, just as salt or anything that's added to water can move its freezing threshold, our thresholds can also be fluctuated. We could have salty people or salty situations in our life that are affecting that threshold. When you are around somebody that isn't good for you, it's typically easier for you to feel stressed, overwhelmed, irritated, emotional, or for you to act out. And same if you put yourself in a bad situation, or if you end up in a bad situation. You typically are more easily stressed, irritated, emotional, or will act out. Let's say this is your mood scale, and this is the threshold for the bad mood. Anything above here, you'll be in a good mood. Anything below it, you'll be in a bad mood. Now, if you're around a salty person, bad situation, whatever it is, that threshold can move. So now, anything here, you're in a good mood, and all of this is a bad mood. So it takes only a little bit for you to be in a bad mood. So, if you're around good people in good situations, you have a lot more room to be in a good mood. So, if you want to be happy, surround yourself with good people and good activities. And if you agree with me, let me know down in the comments below. Or if you have an example of a bad situation, and let us know how that affected you. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Now you can watch this beautiful, amazing video of a frozen bubble. And it'll help you put you higher up on the scale and in a better mood.